So I said that not because I don't think that foreign intervention plays an important role in returning Myanmar back to civilian rule and democratic rule. It obviously does. Sanctions, global arms embargoes, cutting off ties to the military, both in terms of military aid as well as economic investments, will make a difference. But there has been quite a number of people in Myanmar who are advocating for some sort of international military intervention, which, we've seen what happens in the Middle East. We've seen what happens in other countries where, countries, however well intentioned, come in without understanding local context and end up creating situations in which there are protracted violent engagements for decades.
Because, of course, ASEAN foreign ministers met this week. Australia's mulling its formal response to what's happening in Myanmar, and the UN Security Council are meeting. What could they do to make a difference?
So the people of Myanmar have been calling for some very concrete things. The first of which is a global arms embargo for the entire world to essentially stop assisting the Myanmar military, either through any strategic or educational means, as well as material support. They've also asked that the global community refuses to legitimize the Myanmar military's rule by refusing to engage with any of their UN envoys, representatives, whatever it is that they appoint, unless it is to speak to them to urge negotiation with a civilian government in order to return Myanmar to civilian rule.
Well, the violence against protesters has escalated significantly this week. How much longer do you think demonstrators can hang on?
So, I think we need to look at the fact that the people of Myanmar have decades of experience living under military rule, under which Myanmar went from being one of the richest countries in Southeast Asia to one of the poorest. And so, if you talk to protesters who are out in the streets, the unanimous answer that all of them give is that they are ready to suffer. They're ready to weather shortages, inflation, anything it takes to make sure that they don't return to military rule.
How are protesters organising themselves, given their access to the internet has often been cut? In fact, I think we're lucky to have connection with you this evening.
So protesters are using all sorts of methods. Internet is not cut the entire day. We do have it most of the daytime, although we did suffer some power cuts today, and it's unclear why those power cuts happened nationwide. But people have also been protesting by communicating with one another during protests. People have also downloaded location-based communication apps like Bridgify, and also, the good old-fashioned way on with phones, as well as with pamphlets and printed materials.
And what is it like on the streets that you've seen? Are people scared? How are they trying to stay safe? What are you seeing?
So what we've seen in Yangon and a lot of other areas where there are daily protests is that there's specific areas, for the most part, where protests happen. So if you're in parts of a city where protests don't take place, life can look quite normal and it can look like nothing out of the ordinary is happening at all. And then you move, 10 blocks over where there are sandbag barricades, and you'll hear stun grenades going off, and it really does feel like a war zone.
Gender politics have come into play with, I understand, the hanging of women's clothing to slow the advance of security forces. Can you tell us more about this?
Yeah, so a strategy that protesters have begun to use against the military, which is this highly misogynistic, highly rigid, structured, macho organization, is to play into their stereotypes about women. In Myanmar, a lot of people, especially sort of very misogynistic people, believe that anything that touches a woman's lower body is spiritually tainted, and to pass by or go close to a woman's clothing, especially to go underneath it, would lower the dignity and holiness of men. And so what protesters have done is they've hung laundry essentially across cities, major roadways, things like this. And we've really seen it being really effective in that there are many pictures and videos of soldiers taking the time to take the laundry down in order to pass their trucks and convoy through, which allow protesters time to regroup or escape as necessary.
Seems to have been effective. We're looking at some of those pictures right now. Now, are you hopeful the civil disobedience movement can withstand the ongoing pressure and eventually overthrow the military?
Yeah, I think a lot has been said about the strength of the military, but what they're facing is essentially a nation that's refusing to be governed. And because of that, and I think if there is unity among protesters and a willingness to commit to the strategy, then it can be successful.
What will it take and how much longer until there is a breaking point for the military? Just finally, Aye Min.
Um, I mean, it's difficult to say and predict the future, but I don't think this is something that will be resolved in a few weeks' time, as some people are hoping. I think it's likely that this will take months.
Aye Min Thant, thank you so much for joining us. Really good to get your insights from Myanmar there.
Thank you for having me.